The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge. This is the place where you come to get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques to leapfrog over the pack in sales, persuasion, and influence. Be sure you visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now sit back, tune in, and enjoy today's episode. Hey, welcome to the Influencer's Edge. It's funny. I always have a green room conversation with my guests before the show, and he stepped into a trap. He said, any topic you want to bring up is fine for conversation. So I'm thinking, he doesn't know who he's talking to. Yeah. Our guest today, this is really his name, Brad Dude. His last name is Dude. Dude, great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Paul.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to rib you about that. And you were saying that your son gets a lot more static from it than you did when you were a kid.
When my son's a police officer in DC, and so he would say something like, "That's officer dude to you," you know.
Officer dude.
Yeah.
This dude stopped me at the red light. Really? No, his name was Dude. All right. So, Brad, your short bio, which I tend to speed through.
Sure.
Brad, you have 40 plus years of international leadership and management experience. Pause. What does leadership mean to you? Everyone has different definitions of leadership. What is leadership to you, and what are the top elements of leadership?
Well, there's a lot of definitions. I like the one that says leadership is nothing more than influence, nothing more, nothing less. And to me, that got me kind of interested in getting involved with leadership. And I've written a few books on it and really like to explore different aspects of leadership. For me, the biggest elements are self-awareness is kind of number one for me. And I've kind of focused a lot of my career on that area. I think it's also being open to criticism from the people that you are leading is very important.
Let's talk about that. Let's hit the pause button there, because creating an environment where the the people who are under your leadership or involved with your leadership feel safe to give you that criticism is no small thing. So it's one thing to say it. It's another thing to step into the place where you can hear it and create a safe space for people to give it. So what would you say about that?
I've consulted with a lot of executives who say, I've got an open door policy. And then you talk to some of their employees and they say, yeah, it's open, but I would never walk in there. And so it's, not genuine. And for those who really think they have an open door policy, it's a lack of self-awareness. They don't really know the vibes that they're giving out. In the workshops, I used to do a lot of leadership workshops. And at the end of each workshop, we basically do an evaluation, and it gets back into the idea about accepting criticism. And we'd have just 3 questions, and it would be, what did we do well? What could we do better? And where should we go from here? And my response is always, and everybody's response in doing that is always, thank you. That's it. You don't defend what you did or try to explain why you couldn't do this or that. You just take it all in. And that sets that tone. And that's how we set, a learning environment when we used to do the training workshops.
How would you deal with executives who just so how do you take that mindset and put it into executives who just are so find it so abhorrent? Did you ever have to wrestle any of these bears to the ground and say, look, buddy, you didn't pay me the paycheck just to not receive what I'm trying to get across to you? How did you get it across to the recalcitrant people who, or did you just figure cut your losses and get out of there, take the check and leave?
Uh, well, I hate to say it kind of like that, take the check and run. But I have had some come to Jesus type sessions with these executives who, hire me to do a evaluation of their organization, and you talk to, people cross section of their employees at different from different levels, and you come up with a report. Usually it was written and oral debriefing of it, and sometimes, they didn't want to hear it. Especially, I think political appointees. Yeah, any of
Forget
them.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
forget
get
it.
it. See,
Thank,
I've
thank you very
I've
much. Get
barely
out. You know.
I've barely gotten through, and also international leadership and management. So I've a little personal history. I've dated some women from Scandinavian countries, and their approach to leadership and management is much different. Have you ever taught or consulted in Scandinavia?
No, I uh, I have focused on the developing world typically.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Because
uh,
there's some cultures in which they have the tall poppy syndrome, that you should never stand about head and shoulders above anyone else. If don't brag about your accomplishments, don't try to be in charge, or you'll get cut down. So tell us about the mindset of, when you're dealing with teams in the third world as opposed to the United States, where a lot of it is based on individualism and boasting. And how is it different there?
Culture plays a lot to do with it. I spent a lot of time in the Pacific, and I do a presentation on temperament and how it influences our self-awareness and learning and leadership. And most of the participants understand it, buy into it, accept it. And the theory of that is that everybody has it because we're born with it, with a temperament.
What do you
But
mean? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Brad. What do you mean? What is Brad Dude's definition of
well,
temper? I've been told I'm temperamental, 90% temper and 10%
there
mental, but bad
you go.
joke.
There you go. Well, it's that inborn, we're born with it. So it's kind of the inborn part of our personality that influences how we view the world, and especially for leaders, how we view observable behavior. So it's what the first book we wrote on it was what ticks you off, what makes us tick, what makes you tick, and what ticks you off, and it
Oh,
all gets into that. So there are things that you see that just ticks you off, and you have a knee jerk reaction to it. Rick Hanson's book, Buddha's Brain, talks about our this the negative self talk that we all
yeah,
have to some extent, and how we deal with that. So culture in the third world where I have worked, especially in the Pacific, but other places as well, they buy into the concepts, but the culture says you don't make waves, you don't say anything to the boss, you don't do this, you don't do that.
right.
But what it is they learn how to drive down their kind of inborn biases and preferences for the culture that
Yeah,
says, I'm just going to get along. And so
yeah.
you deal sometimes with a lot of frustrated folks, and you wonder why, they're in some of they're musu, why they're in a snit all the time, or why they're on, you talk to the bosses and it's like, yeah, this guy is really unhappy all the time. Well, there could be a lot of reasons for that, including cultural influence that they have, and they can't rock the boat. And then, of course, they all wish they would be boss themselves. And then there's a change in politics. Then the ones that were below get to run the shop, and now they're the same way. It's revenge time. Hey, you did that to me and my family. I'm doing this to you. I'm in charge. So
What,
it's a tough road to hoe. It's small steps in the third world in making change.
when you say third world, what are you referring to? You said the Pacific. What Pacific of the third?
Oh, well, the islands, I want to say third world. It's really the developing world. It's I used to work in Micronesia a lot, and I was in Samoa. I started out with Peace Corps uh, as a volunteer teacher, and then into training. And so a lot of time I spent out in the Pacific. But I've been lucky to go all over the world to do training and leadership consulting.
Cool. Get back to it. See how we haven't gone through the biography. Author of a number of leadership books and co-developer of the basic elements of temperament. So let's talk about temperament. What are the basic elements of temperament?
There are a lot of temperament models out there. The most famous are the Myers-Briggs type indicator and social styles, and
Forgive
they're
me. I'm so sorry, ladies and gentlemen and guests. I'm fiddling with my microphone because the connection is loose and my sound's going to be horrible. I'm so sorry, Brad. Forgive me. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead, Brad.
so there's a lot of different models out there. What my At the time, my training partner uh, Jim Harden and I found, especially when we were working with NASA, we worked for NASA for 9 years doing leadership training. We found that many of them had gone through these other kinds of models. But when we asked them to say, okay, Myers-Briggs, there are 16 boxes. Oh, which are you? Which four are you? And sometimes they could remember, usually they couldn't. And then you ask them, what does it stand for? And they couldn't. So we felt there was a need to have a simple way of referring to your temperament, knowing that all of us have the temperament. So our basic element, we used earth, air, fire, and water. And
Isn't
if you,
that a band?
it should be. And so we tried to develop it, and in fact wrote our first book. That was the first book on that we wrote on the basic elements, was what makes you tick and what ticks you off. Basic element. We're all born with four basic temperaments in us. It's all about the hormones in our brain chemistry at birth, and it gets developed, over time and through our education and our experiences. Earth, air, fire, water. Quickly, let me go through them. Earth. These are the more traditional types, the ones who deal with facts and realities, very practical, very traditional. As leaders, they want to they want to keep their organization the way it is and run as smoothly as possible. Don't like change. Earths. A lot of times they're managers. A lot of times they're the ones who develop the rules of which the organization operates. Airs. Airs uh, are the people that are into being competent. They're the ones that are great vision seekers. They can tell where your organization is going down the road, but they don't deal with people too well. They'd rather be
Wow.
kind of left alone to kind of with their whiteboard and kind of figure out things. And if they don't perceive you as being competent as a leader, you're not, you're going to be dismissed pretty easily. So that's earth, that's air, fire. These are much like earths in terms of they like the data. They're the practical ones. They like where the earths like to take that data and plan and organize around it. Fires are the practical ones saying, hey, let's try this. They're troubleshooters. The way they take the data and the way they make a decision today might be different than the way they do it tomorrow. They're humorous. They like to have fun. And if you work for a leader like that, it's hard to know what they're going to do next. It's always a different thing every day. And waters are your people persons, if you will. They get along with everybody. They're the ones who care about the policies that leaders make that impacts the workforce. Problem with oftentimes if you are a water leader is you can't say no to people, and so you end up making people feel that you have favoritism sometimes. So earth, air, fire, water, we're born with them. It's kind of like a stacked plate, dinner plates in a restaurant. You're the one that is the most dominant for you, call it your dominant temperament, whichever one it is. And all of us have all four temperaments in us, but whichever one is the more dominant for you, that's the way you like to see the world. That's the way you like to be perceived by others, whether it's earth, air, fire, water, whichever one it is for you.
Is this, Brad, if I could push the pause
Yeah.
button, is this contextual? For example, could you hold one primary temperament at work and then a different one at home in your relationships with your spouse or your kids or your significant other?
The model would say no, that you only have one dominant temperament, but and of course, the purpose of the basic elements of temperament is to develop all four temperaments. We'll be better leaders, better husbands,
Ah,
better neighbors when we learn to develop all of them. Many times in our leadership classes, when you do a temperament workshop, people don't even recognize that they have one, have different types of temperament, within them. They wonder why they react the way they do, and then we get into that discussion. The most important difference we felt in our basic elements of temperament model from others is the fourth temperament, which of the four stacked earth, air, fire, water, whichever one it is for you, that last one is the one that would be the least preferable temperament for you. That means you don't want to be perceived that way. That means that when you see behavior in your organization that demonstrate that shadow behavior, we call it the shadow temperament,
I love
that's
that.
what ticks you off. That's what ticks you off a lot. And that's what gets us in trouble because we have a knee-jerk reaction oftentimes to seeing that behavior. And it could be nothing more than our internal bias to that shadow temperament.
I love that. That's really super cool. That'd be cool to be able to profile someone you're dating. You keep coming back to that because hold on a minute, because I used to be a dating coach, seduction coach. So what did I figure out?
Well, Helen
They're
Fisher wrote a book called Why Him, Why Her, and used that very thing for dating. And a lot of her research was from, I think, Match.com and some other dating sites. She doesn't emphasize the shadow like we do in terms of our leadership, but yeah.
yeah.
And so, and of course, an abuse of that is to profile people.
What's
Oh,
wrong with profiling people if you
well,
do
of
it in
course,
a
you
way
say,
that
oh,
serves?
you say, well, look at that, Paul. He's a fire. Oh, we can't have him assigned to that job. He's a fire because it requires a more traditional
Oh,
approach. So we wouldn't want to do that. So we use that as a tool. And the basic elements of temperament, the way Jim and I developed it, is a tool for self-awareness. It's for the leader to learn more about themselves and be able to understand his or her organization a little bit better.
okay. I get it. I'm just thinking profiling people is a way of understanding them better and then manipulating, no, I mean, motivating them to do things. Never mind. I can see that's not landing for you, and I get it.
Well, remember,
Uh,
any task can be done. It doesn't matter what your temperament is, you can do it. Some will be, it'll just be easier than others. For an example, a friend of ours, when we were doing our research for the first book, he was a fire. So, I mean, he's a very active guy, troubleshooter, didn't follow the rules, liked to change things around, got a job in the bank. Well, the bank is kind of an earth organization with
yeah,
rules. You line up here, you follow the rules, you follow the form. And he could do the job as a teller, but it drove him nuts. And he didn't last that long in it.
I'm
And that's
definitely
an
that
example. Yeah,
category.
it's an example of how it's not that you can't do the job and do it well. It's just the toll it sometimes takes on you
How
when
quickly can you tell? Like, could you tell what I am just by the way I'm talking, or
it's hard to tell just, right away because, without really knowing somebody
got
a
it?
little bit better.
That's
And
an
that's why I
honest.
wouldn't want to jump to conclusion. I talked to you for a few minutes and, you sound like a fire. So I'm going to treat you like a fire. And we wouldn't want to do that. We wouldn't want to bias
I'm
ourselves that way. Well,
I'm more like a down power line,
there you go.
active wire.
Well, if we say, that, hey, Paul's having trouble with doing this kind of job, well, I might think as a leader or a manager, well, what's going on with him? Is his temperament involved? Is that something he just can't stand doing, doesn't want to be perceived as being good at it? That may be an influencer, not the only one, but it's a tool.
Cool. What are the names of your book? Give me the name of your book.
That one, the first one is kind of the model for the basic elements is what makes you tick and what ticks you off. Yeah, it's
Love that.
available on Amazon. There's 5 or 6 leadership books I have on that.
Cool. We've come to the end of our time. Now, I want to ask, my audience always wants to stay in touch, stay in the conversation. What's the best way for my audience to stay in the conversation with you, Mr. Dude?
Uh, I have a website. It's braddude.com. And on it, if we talk about temperament, I've got a quiz, a free quiz on there. It's kind of fun to take, kind of gives you little bit more information about each of the temperaments. And it's you can also get it just braddude.com/quiz. And you can get it, but it's also on the website. Website has all the books on it as well, a link to Amazon, so it's easy to do. I'm also doing some TikTok videos, book talk videos, and so
They're banning TikTok as
I
it's,
know, I know,
what is
I
it, January 17th today,
I know they're
16th?
talking about it now.
They're going to
So
ban it in the next week or two. So get off the platform.
I know exactly right. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that, but it's just Brad Dude author to take a look at some of the fun TikToks.
Okay, thanks for being on the show, and stay with me for a after show green room chat, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, Brad Dude has been our guest. I'm sorry for the sound problems. We'll get this microphone fixed, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Influencer's Edge. And thank you again, folks, for making us the top 10% for marketing of all things ranked globally. It's gobsmacking to me. I brag to everyone about it. Brad, thanks again.
My pleasure.
The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Thank you for tuning in to the Influencer's Edge, where you get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques so you can leapfrog over the pack at sales, influence, and persuasion. Remember to visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com to enjoy even more great episodes like this one. We look forward to seeing you again on the Influencer's Edge Show.